Hey everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to crochet this beach set. I'll also link the written pattern that I made for this set down below. In this tutorial I included some different variations that you can do. So for the shorts I'll show how you can do either a ribbing or scallop detail on the bottom of them, and I'll also show how you can make an optional scallop detail on the top. For the most part, this pattern is beginner friendly, but I will go ahead and put the stitches I used in this pattern up on the screen just so you can kind of gauge the difficulty. And let's get into it. So for materials, I recommend using either a weight 3 or a weight 4 yarn. The first time I made this pattern, I used a weight 4 yarn and a 3.5mm hook, but for the set that I made in this video, the weight 4 yarn that I used felt a bit more like a weight 3 yarn, so I actually ended up using a 3mm hook. You'll also need scissors, a darning needle, and some stitch markers. So for the top, we're going to first start with the flower portion. So you might want to screenshot this right here where it's blown up, or just pause it here when you make the flower. But this is probably the most difficult part of the tutorial because it's a little different than normal filet crochet. But this part does not have to be perfect or exact because when we go to sew on the flower pieces later, we can kind of shape and manipulate how they look. So to start, make a slip knot, leaving a long tail for sewing later, and we're going to be starting with that center portion of the flower that kind of looks like a backward L shape. So to do that, I started by chaining 3, and then I made 2 single crochets, making my first one in that second chain from my hook. So that's the 2 squares at the bottom of the L shape. Then I chained 1 and turned my work and made a single crochet in that first stitch. And I just repeated that 2 more times to get those 3 squares that are stacked on top of each other. So just chain 1 and turn your work and single crochet. Then after that last single crochet, just chain 1 and cut your yarn, leaving a long tail. Then for the little spots at the end of that center portion of the flower, I just made 3 circles. So for the first one, I made a magic ring and I put 6 single crochets into the center of it. After the 6th single crochet, I tightened the ring and I made a slip stitch back into that first single crochet and cut my yarn. For the other 2 circles, I made a magic ring and I only put 3 single crochets into the center of it. And again, I tightened it down and slip stitched back into that first single crochet and cut my yarn. So starting with that top petal right there, make a slip knot, and I started at the bottom of the petal, so I chained 2, that second chain being the turning chain. And that square right there is where I'm starting. So then I went ahead and put 1 single crochet in that second chain from my hook, so that counts as that first square, and then chain 1 and turn. So now you can see we have 2 squares in that next row, so I went and made an increase, so 2 single crochets in that 1 stitch. And then chain 1 and turn. So for the next row we have 3 squares, so I made a single crochet in that first stitch and then an increase in that last stitch. And then here I'm just pointing out that there's that gap or that one missing square plus 2 more. So for that I chained 3 plus 1 for a turning chain for a total of 4, and I turned my work. In that second chain I'm going to make a single crochet and then make another single crochet in that next stitch, and then that following stitch is where that gap is, so in that one I'm just going to make a slip stitch. And then from there we're kind of going up into the next row, which is a little confusing, and that's what I meant about it not really needing to be exact. But basically I'm going to make a single crochet in those last 3 stitches. And then chain 2 plus 1 for the turning chain and turn your work. And starting in the second chain from your hook, make a single crochet and then just make a single crochet in every stitch all the way down. And you're just going to make 2 more rows of this, so just make 1 single crochet in each stitch. Then for this row, starting from that right side, make a slip stitch and then 5 single crochets until we have 2 stitches left. So now, leaving those last 2 stitches unworked, we're going to chain 1 and turn, and then slip stitch in the first stitch, and then finally making those last 2 single crochets. And here you can see the finished petal, and I know this can seem a bit confusing, but you can kind of just play around with it and adjust these petals to get the shape you want, especially when we sew them on later. So for the next petal, I moved on to the one that was to the left of the last one we just did, and here I'm just kind of showing you the movement and direction I went in to make it. So I'll go ahead and put the exact directions up on the screen, and you can pause it. Here I'm just showing where I ended up. So I then made this long section. So to do that, make a slip stitch into the first stitch, and then make 2 single crochets. Chain 1 and turn, and then you want to repeat that 3 more times, so just making 2 single crochets, chaining 1 and turning. But for that last time, you want to make an increase in the first stitch of that row, since that last row has 3 squares. And go ahead and cut your yarn. So now I reattached my yarn to do this little section here. So make a slip knot and attach your yarn into that second square from the end. And make a single crochet in that same stitch. Chain 1 and turn, and repeat that 2 more times to make 2 more single crochets on top of it, so you should have a stack of 3 single crochets. Then I moved on to the bottom petal, so that's what it's looking like right now. So I started at the bottom and finished out the left side, and then I reattached my yarn to finish out that right side. So go ahead and finish up the last 2 petals, following the same process, and then we will move on to the rest of the top. So now we're going to work on the actual base part of the top. So we need to make a chain that runs from our side seam all the way to our other side seam across the largest part of our bust. So I'll show what that looks like here in a second. So to start this, we're just going to make a slip stitch and make a chain that measures that length. So for me, I chained 90. So here's what it looks like on, and I made sure that I stretched it farther onto my back because the chain will start to shorten as we begin to build up our rows. Now chain 1 for our turning chain, and we're just going to make a single crochet in each stitch all the way down, working in both loops, and that's essentially what the entire top is. So we're just going to make rows of single crochets, and you can really do any stitch here. I just decided to do single crochets because they provide the most coverage. So here's where I'm at with my top, and I'm pretty happy with the height of it. The reason I made the flower first was to just make sure that I made enough rows of the single crochets for the flower to fit onto nicely. So with my yarn still attached, I'm going to make the straps. So to do this, I chained 90 plus 1 for a turning chain, and then I just worked slip stitches all the way down for extra strength. When I reached the beginning where I attached my yarn, I just put 2 slip stitches into the stitch next to the one where my yarn was attached, and then I cut my yarn. Next, I just placed my stitch markers into each corner, as well as the middle stitches on each side of the top, and this is where all of the straps will be going. So you're just going to attach your yarn in each of the stitches where your stitch markers are, and chain the same number as you did for the first strap, while making slip stitches all the way back down. When you finish your straps, I recommend trying your top on and ensuring that it fits nicely and all the straps are long enough. And then you want to use a stitch marker to mark the farthest point out where you would want your flower to end. So now I just started placing my flower down and laying it out how I wanted it to look, and I used stitch markers to outline the shape of it. So you can see here that for this step you can really kind of mess around with how you want the flower to look. And for this top, I had all of the petals touching, but for my other set, I left the petals separated, so it's really up to you, however you want to do it. Then I secured these petals by sewing them onto the top, and I weaved my ends into the back part of the top. So here's how the flower looks, all sewn on, and now I'm going to show you how you can add the optional scallop detail onto the top and bottom of this top section. So to start, make a slip knot and attach your yarn to the corner of the top row. Then in the second stitch from your hook, so skipping that first stitch, place 3 double crochets in that same stitch. Then skip the following stitch and work a slip stitch in the next stitch. And we are just going to repeat this all the way down. So you just skip 1 stitch, make 3 double crochets, skip a stitch, and make a slip stitch. When you get to the end of the row, don't worry if you have just one stitch left, like the one that you're supposed to skip. Just go ahead and make a slip stitch in that stitch and cut your yarn. So now you can add that scallop detail to the bottom of the top. So just attach your yarn to one of the corners, and you should only see one loop on that starting chain. Instead of working in that one loop, I ended up going into that first row of single crochets that we made just to add some extra support. And then I just continued that same process that I did on the top, so making 3 double crochets, skipping a stitch, making a slip stitch, and skipping a stitch, and repeating that all the way down. So now that the top's all done, we're going to move on to the shorts. So we're going to start with the waistband, so that's that rib detailing. So go ahead and make a slip knot and chain 10. And then in that second stitch from your hook, make a single crochet and then continue that all the way down. So make 9 single crochets. When you reach the end of the row, go ahead and chain 1 and tighten your knot. And then turning your work, we're going to make single crochets all the way down, working through the back loop only. At the end of the row, chain 1 and turn, and we're just going to be repeating this to make the entire waistband. So just making single crochets in the back loop only, so you should have 9 in each row. And you're going to repeat this until you have a band that reaches all the way around your waist. So here's what my band ended up looking like, and you want to make sure that it's able to stretch over your hips as well. And you can always add an optional drawstring at the end if it is a bit loose in your waist. So now we're going to be joining the ends of the waistband. So with the side that your yarn's attached to, you're going to insert your hook into the back loop only, and then your other side should only have 1 loop. So you're just going to be making a single crochet in the back loop only of the side that your yarn's attached to, and then the 1 loop on the other end. With your yarn still attached, chain 2, and now we're going to be making half double crochets all the way around the band. So these aren't actual stitches, so we're going to be working the half double crochets into the side of each raised row and then the sides of each unraised row. So you can kind of see how I'm doing that in the video. And I try to go under 2 loops just for extra strength. And we're just going to be repeating this all the way around the band until we reach that first half double crochet. When you reach the end of the round, make a slip stitch into that second chain of the starting chain. Chain 2 and turn your work. And for the next 2 rows, we're just going to make rows of half double crochets in each stitch, making sure to turn your work after each row. So for each row here on out, instead of slip stitching into that second chain to join the round, we're going to be making a slip stitch into the first half double crochet of that round. So after row 3, I recommend trying on the shorts to just make sure that they're fitting nicely, and really just frequently trying them on as you make them. So now we're going to be placing stitch markers where we want our hip increases to be. So where we've been starting each row is the butt seam, so we want to find the 2 sides of that to find the hips. So I first started by eyeballing it and placing the stitch markers where I thought they would go, and then I just ended up counting the number of stitches from where we started each row out to the sides. When you get to your stitch marker, make 2 half double crochets into that stitch to make an increase, and then just place your stitch marker back into that first half double crochet that you just made. Then continue the round like normal and make an increase in your next stitch marker. After you finish this row, you're going to repeat it 3 more times. So again, you're just going to be changing directions each row, and then make a half double crochet in each stitch, making an increase in your stitch marker stitches, and then placing the stitch marker back into that first half double crochet. So now we're going to be adding stitch markers for where we want to make our butt increases. So to do that, you're going to find the center stitch between the stitch marker on the hips and where you've been starting and ending each row. So now in the next few rows, we're going to be making 4 increases. And just keep in mind that you'll end your hip increases before your butt increases. So to measure this, I recommend just trying on the shorts every 2 to 3 rows. And once you reach the largest part of your hips, take out the hip stitch markers and then do the same with the butt. So once you reach the largest part of your butt, you'll end those increases. And then here in this clip, I'm just showing that I reached the largest part of my hips, so I went ahead and removed the hip stitch markers and continued the rows. So I continued making rows where I just increased in those 2 stitch markers for my butt. Here you can see I reached the largest part of my butt. Once you reach that point, just take out your stitch markers, and then you just want to continue making rows of half double crochets until you reach about your crotch level. So you can see what that looks like here. The bottom of my work is pretty much right at crotch level. Now you want to fold your work so that where you just ended your row is now on the side, and you want to find the other side of the shorts. So that's going to be the front seam, because now we're going to be separating the shorts into the 2 holes. Then putting your yarn back on your hook, you're going to make a chain to attach to where you just put your stitch marker. So this is creating that bridge to make it into 2 holes. So I'd make around 8 to 10 chains for this part, I made 10 just because my yarn's on the thinner side for a weight 4, and then I would recommend trying them on just to make sure it's not pulling anywhere. Then slip stitch where your stitch marker is and chain 2, and now you're going to make half double crochets down that chain that you just made, working through both loops. Now you're just going to continue making half double crochets all the way around until you reach that chain 2, so you should only be working on one leg hole. When you're back at the beginning, slip stitch into the first half double crochet that you made. Then you're just going to be continuing rows of half double crochets until you reach the length of the shorts that you want, keeping in mind that you might want to add the rib detail or the scallop detail at the end. So I only ended up making 3 rows of half double crochets before adding my scallop detail on the end. From here on out, you do not have to change the directions in between each row. If you want to do the rib detail, to start you would chain 6. And then starting in the second chain from your hook, make 5 single crochets all the way down. I accidentally made half double crochets here, but it should be single crochets. And then when you reach the bottom, you're going to slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. Then turn your work. And then skipping those first 2 stitches, because those are the 2 slip stitches that you just made, you're going to make 5 single crochets in the back loop only. And you're just going to repeat this all the way around. So when you reach the top, you're going to chain 1, work 5 single crochets in the back loop only, make 2 slip stitches, turn your work, skip the first 2 stitches, and make 5 single crochets in the back loop only. So if you choose the scallop option, chain 2 and skip that first stitch, and then the following stitch you're going to make 3 double crochets. And I just want to say I started by making 3 double crochets for the scallop stitches, but when I tried on my shorts I felt like the scallops were a little stretched out, so I ended up changing it later on and making 5 double crochets in those stitches instead. Once you make your scallop or your 3 or 5 double crochets, skip the next stitch, make a slip stitch, and then just repeat that all the way down. So I'd recommend starting with the 3 double crochets to make your scallop and try it on, and if it is stretching, I would recommend just making 5 double crochets in those scallop stitches instead. Now you're just going to attach your yarn to one of the stitches near the crotch and just repeat the same number of rows that you did on the other side. So for me, I made 3 half double crochet rows and then repeated making my scalloped edge. And when you make your half double crochets on this bridge part, you should only be working through that one loop. So now you're going to make the flower for the shorts. So here's the grid that you want to use for that. And you're just going to follow the same process that you did for the flower on the top. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but trying your best to shape them like the image. So I'm not going to be showing you how to do each petal, but I will come back and show you how to do that center piece. Before moving on to the centerpiece, go ahead and lay out the flower and maybe use some stitch markers to secure it. And for me, I put the flower on the opposite side as the one that I made on the top. Finally, for the center section, I just made 3 circles. So to do that, I made a magic ring and put 4 single crochets in the center of it, and then slip stitch back into that first single crochet. Finally, I sewed on all the pieces and weaved in all of my ends. Lastly, I just want to add, if your waist is still a little bit loose, you can always make a long chain and make slip stitches back down it for extra strength. And then you would just weave that string in and out of the ribbing detail until you can tie the 2 ends at the front. And it's done. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. Bye guys.